Hello everyone, welcome to chapter 11. In this chapter, we are going to continue with the inheritance, the concept of inheritance. And basically, we are going to discuss, in the last chapter, we have seen some of the foundation of inheritance, but there are still some details that we haven't talked about it yet. So basically, inheritance is very important in terms of when we want to use the object-oriented languages. And understanding it in detail is very important if we want to progress from here and for your future. So in this chapter, we are going to continue use the network example that we have used in previous one. As you can see, I pulled that up on the screen, the network one. And I'm just going to go through it a little bit to just kind of remind you guys of, why we kind of using the inheritance. So if you look at this, both of the message post and photo post are connected to news feed. So the concept of inheritance hasn't been used here because they are directly connected to news feed. So if we just look at the source code here, so you see that there are certain source code that message posts and photo posts have in common. So if I go and compare them, there are a lot of private string username, message, timestamp, like, and all of that. And let's look at the photo post. And in photo posts, we have kind of similar things. So we said that we don't want to write all these duplicates because it's hard to maintain, and also it's kind of very long when we want to edit something. So we are going to use another class, which is kind of the middle class between the newsfeed and these two guys. So that middle class is kind of like a super class, and these two are going to be the subclass. So let me go and pull up the network v2 from chapter 10 again. So the network 2 is actually showed us the concept of inheritance. So let's just compile it. And as you can see, so as we have discussed in the previous chapter, post was actually the superclass, and then we have the message post and photo post, which are the subclass of superclass. So if we look at the basically the code for it, as you can see here, we have basically some of the things that the class post has is the username, timestamp, likes, which are both common in both of those other subclasses. So the only thing that you can see, like let's look at one of these now that is kind of specific to that class, is only the it's going to be actually extending from that class post. So yet you can see when they are the subclass, or when they have the concept of inheritance, is actually extending from the other class. It's just something that that's just common to that, is a string file name, and a string caption is only valid for the photo post. And for the file post, for message post, we will have only the string message. So the other fields is going to pull from the post class. So again, you have the concept of extent here, which that shows it is inheriting from this class, which is the post class. So basically, these are the things that we have talked about in the previous chapter. And so we are going to continue with that. So in this chapter, we are going to actually work with chapter 11 exercises. So if I go back here, I hope you have saved it somewhere, the chapter 11 exercises. So you will pull chapter 11 exercises, and the only thing that you will have to deal with is the network diagram, network version 3. So you're going to actually work with this. So I'm just going to compile this, and voila. So let's look at some concepts that are in here. So let's discuss more about inheritance in this chapter. So, as I said, we have got introduced to the main concept of inheritance in the previous chapter, but we need to learn a little bit more details about it. So we are going to actually talk about the polymorphism method in this chapter. We are actually going to look at two types of variables, static and dynamic type. We will talk about the concept of overriding. There are going to be a lot of theoretical things in this chapter, which I'm going to try to kind of explain it slowly to you. And then we are going to also talk about dynamic method lookup and how we can create protected class. This picture is the inheritance, basically the inheritance hierarchy that we have seen in the previous chapter. So let's look at some of the problems that we could have. If we don't have connection between the superclass and subclass, there could be some problem. For example, you want to actually show the message with a timestamp and also the message and the like, and so you want, this is what you want, but what you will get, it will only show the author, and it will only show it will not show the message that you wanted to have in here. So this could cause a problem, is because maybe you don't give the right access, and so the subclass and superclass cannot communicate with each other. So the message class, the message post class cannot communicate directly with the newsfeed, because we have now the inheritance with the post, but we need to be able to give the right access so that it can communicate through post to newsfeed. So let's look at the problem here again. So let's look at the problem. The display method in post only prints the common fields. As we have described, if we look at our picture here, if I click on here, as you can see here, the inheritance is a one-way street. So as you can see, it's one way. It's not. It's communicating from message post to post, from subclass to superclass. So the superclass knows nothing about the subclass field that's here. So it's not communicating back. It's only one-way communication. Keep that in mind. So let's attempt to solve this problem. So this is what we are going to have here. So we can play the display where it has access to the information that it needs in each of the subclasses. Each of the subclasses has its own version, means the message post has its own version, and then photo post has its own version. But post fields are private, so they cannot get access. So which means it needs to get access. That's the problem. We need to give access to it. And so the newsfeed can get access to the post, but since the display can't be found in the post, it's only be found on message posts and photo posts. And because it's only, as we said, inheritance is communicating one way, so it cannot be found. So display post in the message and photo is there, but not in the post. So it cannot communicate with that. So let's look at static type and dynamic type here. Let's look at the static type and dynamic type. If we look at page 395, we both have the definition of this concept and an example there. So the example in there is actually, we are saying car C1 equals new car. We create a new car. And so we say that the type of C is the car. Now we want to actually say vehicle V1 equals new car. What is the type of V1? Well, that depends on what we mean by type of V1. The type of variable V1 is vehicle. the type of object that's stored in the V1 is car. So let's look at some of the terminology here. Basically, we call the declared type of variable the static type because it is declared in the source code. So, and we call the type of object that is stored in a variable dynamic type because it depends on the assignment and the behavior of that program. So in this example, we are looking at the static type of V1 is vehicle and the dynamic type of V1 is car. So let's look at the definition that we have. The static type of a variable V is the type as declared in the source code in the variable declaration statement. And we said that is V1 is the vehicle. The dynamic type of variable V is the type of the object that's stored currently in the V. And the type of object that is storing in the V, we said it's car. So the dynamic variable is, in this case, is car. Sorry, I forgot to change the PowerPoint, but that's what you can see here. So that we said the dynamic type of V1 is car, and then the static type of V1 is the vehicle. So, and these are the definition that we had for that. So the compiler job is to actually check for a static type of violation and to show if it's giving a compiled error. So basically, if we look at our display method, so if I can bring that that picture up. So let's look at the discussion that we had about the post display method. So at this time we can say post.display. The static type of post is going to be post, while the dynamic type of post, it could be either message post or the photo post. We don't know which one of these it could be. Assume that we enter both message post and photo post objects that it can be fed into the post. So the compiler reports an error because for the type checking, the static type is used, as we said, and the dynamic type is often only known at the runtime. So the compiler has no other choice but to use the static type if it wants to do the check at the compile time. So in here, okay, I think I skipped a session. So basically, we are going to actually, the static type of post is post, and as we said, the post doesn't have a display method, so we can actually and it makes no difference that all of the known subtype of posts do have a display method. So the behavior of the compiler is basically reasonable in that way because it has no guarantee that all the subclasses of the post will have the display method. So in order to make this call work, we can actually add the display method in both classes super and subclasses. So the class post must have a display method, and again it has to satisfy both the static and dynamic type of checking. So if we want to actually look at the overriding concept, the definition, a subclass can override the method implementation. To do this, we said the subclass declares a method with the same signature as the superclass, but with the different method body. The overriding method takes precedence for the method calls on subclass objects. So that's what, as you can see in this example here. So if we look at page 397, we can actually look at the code and look at the source code for all those three different classes, for the post class, for the message post, and for the photo post. As you can look at the display method for all of three, you can see that that the display method prints out all the fields that are declared in the post, and those are that are common on message post and photo post. So we can say overriding is a situation where a method is defined in a superclass. In this case, method display in a class post is the example, and method with exactly the same signature is defined in the subclass, which we saw in the code. So again, if we look at this between the static and dynamic type, the static type of post in this case is post, and the dynamic type of dynamic in this case is the photo post. Again, remember, dynamic is what is stored inside the dynamic type, and in this case is photo post. So in here we are going to look at the method lookup, or sometimes we might call it method dispatch or method binding, but for this book we're just going to stick with method lookup. So let's just start with a simple method lookup scenario. In this case, we have an object of a class photo post stored in a variable v1, and declared type is photo post. The photo post class actually, if we look at it, has the display method. So this is not declared in the superclass. So this is actually a very simple situation. We don't have any inheritance, polymorphism, or anything like that. So let's just go how this is going to be executed. First, the variable v1 is going to be accessed. Second, the object stored in the variable is being found. The class object is found, and the implementation of the display method is found in the class and executed. So this is all straightforward. But let's look at a little bit more confusing situation. So let's look at this. So we are looking at method lookup with inheritance, which is a little bit more complicated than that. So in this scenario, we have the same thing, photo post class, but we also have a super class which is called post, and the display method is defined only in this super class, which is the post. So the execution again happens the same step. The variable v1 is being accessed, then the object stored in the variable is going to be accessed, and then the class of object is going to be found. But in the next example, we don't have a display method in this class photo post. Because no matching method has been found, the superclass is going to be searched for a matching method. If there was no method here in the superclass, then the next superclass, if it was existed, it will be searched. And it will just continue all the way until it will find the object, until the method is being found. So in this example, the display method is actually found in the class post. So then this will be executed. This actual scenario showed that how objects inherit the methods, and any method found in a superclass can actually be invoked on a subclass object and will be correctly executed. So let's look at another. The next method lookup is a little bit more complicated. We are going to look at the method lookup with polymorphic variable and also method overriding. This scenario is again similar to the one that we just did, except there are a couple of changes here. The declared type of variable v1 is now post and not the photo post. And the display method is defined in a class post and then redefined it, as we talked about the overriding concept, in the subclass, which is in the photo post as well. So the steps in which we execute, it takes place exactly as what we have gone through the other scenario. There are some observations that we need to kind of make in here. No special lookup rules are used for method lookup in this case, where the dynamic type is not equal to static type. And which method is found first and executed, it is also being determined by the dynamic type, not the static type. In other words, the fact that the declared type of variable v1 is now post, that's what we said, doesn't have any effect. The instance we are dealing with is basically the photo post in here. That's the that we said the dynamic variable. Overriding method in this case is being used. Is subclass actually take precedence over superclass method, because method lookup starts in dynamic class, and that's the photo post in this case. And it starts in the dynamic class, and the last redefinition of a method is found first, and then the other one is being executed. When a method is actually overwritten in this case, only the last version is being executed. So the one lowest in an inheritance hierarchy is going to be executed. Versions of the same method in any superclass are also not going to automatically being executed in this case. So this basically explains the behavior that we are kind of observing in the network project. So only the display method in subclasses, message post and photo post are being executed when the posts are being printed out. So therefore that actually causes a problem. So you will see that it will show the incomplete listing. So the next section we are going to talk about super calling methods, and that will actually fix that problem. So let's look at the super call method. But before we do that, let's look at some of the method lookup summary. First, the variable is being accessed, then the object stored in the variable is found, then the class of the object is being found, then the class is being searched for a method match. If no match is found, the superclass is going to be searched. This is going to be repeated until a match is going to be found or the class hierarchy is executed. And in the last scenario that we looked at, overriding method take precedence over, like the subclasses take precedence over the superclass. So let's look at the super call in methods. So now that we know a little bit more detail about how overwritten methods are executed, we can actually understand the solution to this problem. So we want to achieve this for every call to a display method. Say a photo post object to result in both the display method of the post class and the photo post class being executed for the same object. So then all of the details in that case will be printed. Let's look at the example here. We can simply use the super or construct, which we are already looked at in the constructor chapters. So let's look at an example here. So in here, what we are doing, we're actually redefining the method with the super call. So this word, the super, so we're redefining this method using the super call. So when the display is now called on a photo post object, initially the display method in the photo class is being invoked. At its first statement, this method will run into invoke display method of the superclass, which print out the general post information. When control returns from the superclass method, the remaining statement of the subclass method print is going to print the other fields of the photo class. So other thing that I want to let you know that, so we always have the super dot name of the method, and then in the parentheses the parameter. So in this way, the name of the method display. It could be something else in another program. So super, we access it. So basically, in the super, when we use super, we access it through the super class. Super helps us in synchronizing and coordinating. And so it's not always, another thing worth mentioning is that it's not always going to be automatic. So the super call is not going to be automatic. It's generated as if it's optional, and it's entirely optional. So the default behavior gives the effect of subclass method completely hiding it or overriding the superclass version of the same method. So if you have it in exercise 11.3, you can basically modify the latest version of the network project to include the super call in the display method and test it to see what you get as a result. But just remember, a super call only has to be made when it's necessary to access the superclass version of an overridden method. So if you complete the exercise 11.3, you will realize that this solution works, but it's not perfect yet. It prints out all the details, but in a different order from what we want. So, and we will discuss how we are going to solve it. So this is for the first part of this week's lecture. Please listen to the other recording that I have, and it will cover method polymorphism. Also, it will talk about the object equality, and as well we will discuss about protected access and instances of operator.